Now, there's a few ways to go about warping a full track, but they all start with the same procedure. So I'm going to go in here and start warping this track based on what we discussed in the last video. Although this time I'm not going to tap out the tempo, what I'm going to do is simply audition various tempos to see what works with the tune by ear. For example, I'll put the BPM to 127 and drag the start marker to beat 1. And when I play this back, you can hear the tune is really close to the click track, but it's getting slightly thrown off. This means we're close to the tempo, but it's not quite there. So I'll try moving this up to 128 and I'll test it out. And you can hear the track is definitely at 128 now. So this is simply another way to find the tempo without having to tap it out over here. So basically, you can simply test various tempos by ear by playing the original track with different tempo settings. If the track lines up with the click, then you found the tempo of the original track. So we know for sure this track is at a tempo of 128. To fully warp this track at its original tempo and feel, you can right-click on the start marker, and you can actually skip clicking set 111 here, and we're going to focus on using these different warp from here options. So if we click warp 128 from here, this will warp your entire song perfectly at 128 BPM in one click. If you're working with a tune with vocal breaks or an a cappella vocal track, or really anything without too much of a steady rhythm, such as a kick drum to focus on, this warping method is amazing and will be your best friend in situations like warping a vocal track. For the reason that it doesn't have to focus on any specific rhythms, it warps it simply from the subdivisions of time within the tempo. And I'll show you what happens if we choose the wrong tempo. For example, if I bring this to 126, if I do warp 126 from here, you can hear it gets thrown off the click because we chose the wrong tempo from the original track. And say you're having a hard time finding the original tempo of the tune, most digital music stores tell you the tempo of the song, such as iTunes or Beatport. If you've bought a song from Beatport, you can head over to the website, search for the song, and you can see down here it says the BPM is 128, the key of the song, along with other info as the genre, label, release date, and more. And you'll see that most tracks have this information available. So if you're really having a hard time finding the tempo, you can most likely find it in these places. So let's take a look at the different warp from here options. You have warp from here, which is Ableton Live standard warping option. This will base warping off of the audio wave's transients. So if Ableton Live sees large peaks in the audio wave at a constant rate and rhythm, it may warp these out and stretch the audio to fit with the click track based on these rhythms. So based on this idea, this is the standard all-around approach to warping. If you want to quickly and simply warp a tune, this would be a good option for this. Warp from here, start at 128, is an option used to warp out tracks with a lot of freedom and feel to the tempo. For example, if you're warping out a track with a live band, the band may start playing at a tempo of 128, but maybe throughout the tune they speed up or slow down every so often, since they're playing with a loose and natural feel. This warping option will tell Ableton to watch out for this, and if it finds rhythms slightly falling off the grid, it'll bring them back in time better than it would with the standard warp from here option. So if you're warping a tune with tempo changes and a loose feel, this would be a good option to go with. And we have warp from here straight. This option works best with tunes with no tempo variation. For example, if you have an electronic tune that has a very straight pulse, this could be a good option to work with. There's also this warp as a loop option, but I find this works best with loop-based clips rather than a full song. So the 4 options above will really help you out when choosing the type of warping option to go with. Now, just to see how all this works in real time, I'm going to warp this track out from scratch based on everything we discussed in this video to show you that once you have this down, it's really quick and simple to warp your tunes out for a DJ set. And there we go. That's how you warp out of tune. And now that you know how to do this, I'm going to explain why this track is actually speeding up and slowing down when we change the tempo. When we warp a track in Ableton Live, what we're basically doing is attaching the audio waves in time to this metronome, allowing us to speed up and slow down the metronome, which then causes our song to speed up and slow down. So in a way, we're not really speeding up the song directly. We're speeding up the tempo of the session, for example, the click track, that the song is now attached to with the use of warp markers. And for a better idea of this, I'll show you what warp markers are actually doing.